peak winter. But yes, pretty good weather throughout the day. So that's...
Take a look at Homa Bay. Yes.
All right.
Homa Bay, it's because the president will be there on the second day of his 4-day tour of Nyanza region.
So do you think he's taken the sunshine with him?
Oh, yes.
As you can see.
Very beautiful weather.
Yep, they are going to be experiencing a sunny day all along, all through the day. Of course, with highs of 27 degrees and lows of 19 degrees. It's looking sunny throughout the day. Not much to report. No chances of rain. So everything A-okay. That is currently in Homa Bay.
And finally Nairobi at the end.
Okay, let's take a look at what's happening in the capital. As you can see, feels like 16 degrees. Of course, currently as we speak, it is 16 degrees. But throughout the day, it gets better.
It's getting warmer.
It's getting warmer, which makes me smile. 24 degrees. That is what we're going to be experiencing at around 4 p.m. That's the highs of 24 today right here in the capital. Nothing else to report. All looking good. A bit cloudy up until midday, and then after which it evens up. But yes, we do expect the temperatures to get better as the days go along. Remember, this week the Kenya Meteorological Department did mention, and they did state that we are going to be experiencing some harsh weather. So I hope next week we'll have a more positive update on the weather.
Something else that we need to be looking at today, and as far as the diary is concerned, of course, President William Ruto continues on the second day of his 4-day tour of the Nyanza region. And we'll be looking at that. He may be in Homa Bay. Elsewhere, the Principal Secretary, Immigration and Citizen Services, Professor Julius Bitok, will today host a high-level interactive breakfast meeting with representatives of civil society organizations, religious leaders, and the private sector, among other interest groups. The agenda will be drafting regulations on the registration of persons, Amendment Rules 2024, and the Birth and Deaths Registration Amendment Rules 2024 to streamline Maisha Number and the supporting ecosystem. So that's a big deal happening today. Right, let's take a look at today in history. So today, August 29th, the Soviet Union tested its first atomic bomb, known as the West as Joe 1. It was a direct copy of the Fat Man bomb used by the US military on Nagasaki during World War II. Let's now take a look at the dailies.
All right, we'll be taking a look at the dailies today, and of course the Standard being the first newspaper that we look at. Remember, the top story on the cover page is all about TSC and strike nightmares for schools as TSC warns teachers. And of course, candidates who are going to be sitting this year's KCSE examinations have had their preparations disrupted. Remember, just yesterday, Fred and I were talking about this. We were going to see what happens once the court has ruled for them to call off this particular teachers' strike. What happens next? Well, guess what? They are still on strike despite the court orders. They have defied the court orders to resume work. And this is something that I think we will be seeing more about later on.
I saw quite a number of videos where teachers on strike stormed schools,
yes,
where they suspected that some teachers were still continuing to work, and they actually ejected them.
But that's an age-old tactic, I feel, even when it comes to teachers. Why are you there? You're supposed to be with us.
So it is a big discussion what's happening in the education sector. Now, there's a very beautiful photo there, which should definitely make supporters of President William Ruto smile.
It's a full house, as you can see.
And that's a crowd receiving him in Nyanza. Just imagine that, how things change politically. Yeah. And they call it a turning point as Raila's staff embraces President Ruto. Now, this is a real embrace. You can see he's actually hidden. you can only identify him because you can see the rooftop of his car.
Otherwise,
if he was on foot, you would not even tell where he is.
Now remember, he's on a 4-day development inspection visit of Nyanza. And of course, this is a Meet the People tour.
Right.
And yes, he did. He did meet the people.
Of course, the other big story on the front page of the Standard is this, the conviction of former Samburu Governor Moses Lenol Kulnad. He's been found guilty in an 83 million shilling graft case. Former Samburu Governor Moses Lenol Kulnad becomes the first county boss to be convicted in a corruption case after he was found guilty of conflict of interest and unlawful acquiring of public property. That story is on page 8. Now, this gentleman spent the night in police custody as he awaits sentencing this morning. So today we're going to know whether or not this former governor will have to spend some time in jail.
All right.
That's a very interesting story. Other quick highlights on the top strip.
All right, the shame of idle deputy governors crying out for work, and that's on page 6. You know, we also have the battle for soul of Bamburi, that's in business on page 31. And of course, in sports, why it's not easy to be star Olunga, that's in page 40.
Yes, that's the back page of the Standard.
Yes.
Why it's not easy to be engineer Michael Olunga. He is the Harambee Stars captain and has been subject to criticism whenever he dons national team colors. We have an image of him there. Harambee Stars captain Michael Olunga in action against Rashid Toha of South Sudan during the international friendly match at Kasarani Stadium on September 12th, 2023. That's the Standard this morning. Let's move on now to the Nation.
All right, the Daily Nation, the cover page, of course, occupying majority of the page is the top story that we just spoke about, where, of course, this one says Graft Lord nailed 40 big fish next. And this is Moses Lenol Kulal, who is a former Samburu County Governor who has been convicted of corruptly receiving more than 83 million shillings from the county. An anti-corruption court finds that even though Lenol Kulal had declared conflict of interest, he continued trading with the county through his proxy businessman, Hesbon Dathi, making a total of, hear this out, Fred, 83,467,995 Kenya shillings.
Wow. This paper has dedicated at least 3 pages to coverage of this story. They say Lenol Kulal faces a long jail term after conviction for corruption, even as 40 other former and sitting county bosses face graft cases. And this, I think, is the best angle. The
I was
fact
actually
that, yes,
going to say that.
He has been convicted, but this is just the beginning, that the other 40.
Still in line.
This has never happened before in Kenya's history.
Yes.
A governor getting, or even a former governor, being convicted and actually risking some jail term.
Of course, it also mentions Ferdinand Waititu, and it says 1.9 billion shillings. That's the amount.
Yet he was never convicted.
Yes, exactly.
No one has. This one, sentencing happens this morning.
Right.
So this, and something interesting, they say down here, that he becomes the first governor to face such a nominee, and he tried and convicted after an abortive attempt by the Director of Public Prosecutions to withdraw the case. Imagine the office of the DPP had still tried to withdraw this case.
But the court said nope.
The courts went ahead and convicted him.
Yep. So we'll find out later on this morning, of course, to see what happens and if he will be spending time in jail, and of course, if yes, how long.
Stop bullying teachers. Kotu now tells TSC. Yes, Francis Atwoli has finally spoken for the first time in a very long time.
So he
says workers' umbrella body. Kotu says Teachers Service Commission should cease bullying of tutors with court orders and instead focus on a return to work formula.
I feel like this is an age-old story.
Yeah.
You know, the leader always comes out saying that, yeah, you should listen to the court.
It's a very populist statement.
But then who will listen to the demands of people who are not getting paid?
Yes, the front page of the Daily Nation also has a picture of the president wooing Raila's supporters and signaling 2027 pact will ODM support.
And of course, at the top over there, when it comes to property matters, it says why real estate needs predictable tax regime. And this is, it goes on to say that frequent and erratic revision or regulations creates shaky ground for the construction industry, with investors hanging on to capital outlays in a wait-and-see stance.
That's in the inside property pullout of the Daily Nation, but that highlight is there on the front page. Now, if you flip the paper back in as far as matters education are concerned, away even from the Kotu angle, Kupet is now urging parents to support ongoing strike. Listen to this.
Yeah.
The union says that any parent who decides to send their child to school is assuming full responsibility for their well-being. That's a threat.
Wow.
That's on the back page of The Nation this morning. All right. Let's move on to the next paper.
Of
People
course,
Daily.
that you can see right there at the top, we see the same story with regards to former Samburu County Governor Moses Lenol Kulal, who is, facing 84 million shilling corruption case in Samburu. That makes it to the top on page 8 rather. And then moving down, it says facing auction. And this is about politicians and a State House official who actually owe the IEBC millions that were awarded from unsuccessful petitions filed challenging the outcomes of elections. So the names are all here. And then, of course, you see how much each owes.
And this is the one thing that many politicians don't realize, that once you lose an election and you file a petition, you lose, the court can award costs or can award penalties for your loss. And you have to pay the IEBC because you forced the IEBC to defend itself and pay lawyers to come to court. Yet you didn't have a proper case. Some of those people who've been found to be to have offended this include Josephat Nanok, who is a former Turkana governor. He now works at State House. Former Senator of Embu, Lenny Kivuti, and others like Farah Maalim, who's actually MP Dadaab, as well as a Migori governor.
Interesting.
Ochilo Ayako.
Right, I want to take your attention to the top right over there. That gives us more info on Africa's richest men. Now this, I feel, is going to be quite an interesting one. It's on page 3 of the People Daily. So I'm sure we'll be checking that out. So this is the
gentleman who's overtaken Aliko Dangote as the richest African man.
Yes.
Wow.
That's going to be an interesting one to read. And then, of course, the same when it comes to the strike that turns ugly as teachers evicted from classrooms. Of course, TSC is saying that they are not going to be backing down anytime soon.
All right. Finally, on the Star, the same story that features on the front page of the People Daily, IEBC pursues big guns over poll lawsuit debts. They say agency says auctioneers to be hired next week to recover over 400 million shillings. And the outstanding payments are in respect of cases filed in 2013 and 2017. Imagine them coming for you about a debt from over 10 years ago. Another story, a KDF soldier shot and scuffled with police officers in Embakasi. And there's a story that we may be missing. I think it's on most of the front pages. Deputy governors take battle with their bosses to MPs. They feel they need to be given better working conditions.
Chai si chai tena.
Masuala ya chai kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Kudidimia kwa ubora wa zao hilo kumesababisha mrundiko wa kilo milioni 100 mnadani. So they say about 100 million kgs of Kenyan tea is stuck at the auction in Mombasa. It's not getting any bidders.
Okay, interesting.
Elsewhere, hofu kuta za bahari zikiharibika. Wataalamu wasema mabadiliko ya kina cha maji na ongezeko la mawimbi ni chanzo.
So that is the weather update.
Yes, and what's happening with climate change at the coast. Joto kuhusu tohara Mlima Kenya. Wazee wa Agikuyu wanatofautiana kuhusu umri wa wavulana kutahiriwa. Yes, circumcision is a big deal. And this is about the season in Western Kenya for circumcision. In kule Mlimani, they have to wait till December. All right. Maswala ya spoti, Chelsea mawindoni taji jipya, and let's finally, matters business. Right,
now the Business Daily starts off with talking about Gen Z protests and how it has actually impacted KRA collections to a decade low. It actually went from 18.73% last year, that's tax collection, to 2.87% in July, which I think is quite alarming, of course, for KRA. Now, anti-tax demos, as we do know, disrupted some business activities, and tax collections in July grew at the slowest pace in over a decade, excluding the COVID-19 pandemic period, signifying the effects of business disruptions following the deadly Gen Z protests as the Treasury increased reliance on costly overdrafts. And of course,
how many days did we experience demos? It's like 4 days of June. I just don't realize.
Fred doesn't seem to be convinced, but you know what? I genuinely think that it did impact business in general. I don't know about KRA, but I feel like as the common one, you did feel that
there was that trend on TikTok.
Fred.
Let's get to the cartoons now, and we start off with the cartoon on the Standard. And on the Standard, we have this boyfriend with an S on his shirt. We won't say who that is.
Yep.
And he has his girlfriend who's a customer, But this girlfriend appears to have seen a better prospect.
Do you think it's the ex that they saw?
We've heard of...
you know, you know.
We've heard of Starlink, and I don't know what's happening.
Yep.
So this gentleman is about to lose his girlfriend to this
To the
who
ex.
has the loot, and he appears more moneyed.
Yeah.
That's the standard. They say remote regions. So this one will be targeting the remote regions.
Interesting.
Meanwhile, wake up at room.
And look at that. The heart is beating.
The customer is already in love.
So I genuinely feel like for her, this man right here is the star.
She has already moved. Oh, yes.
If you know,
I
you know.
I like so what you did right there. On the Daily Nation.
Babu picking off where Baba left in ODM. Of course, this is a very, very interesting one because we see eggs. Then we see the chicken. And then we see a couple of faces, which I think are making me
now this is
laugh.
This was what was described as a young leadership within ODM.
Yes.
They're still on eggs.
Still yet to hatch.
Brooding on this side.
The
But
eggs.
now, I feel like that statement by Yoweri Museveni, the
Yes.
Ugandan president, with regard to Babu
Did
Owino,
you
has given him some new lease of life politically, that everyone is now talking about Babu Owino. Kwani, how powerful is he?
Did you see what he said about Museveni?
And he said he respects...
As a grandfather. And he said that he has been in this industry, in politics, for the longest time. And he has been there as his grandfather figure. Very interesting.
So while the rest of the chicken sit on eggs, he's sitting on oranges.
Oh, I don't know why. I feel like these are golden eggs, though.
These are oranges.
Oranges
ODM.
or golden eggs?
So Babu picking off where Baba left in ODM. You see, everyone else has moved to government. That's a cartoon on the Daily Nation. Babu.
Very interesting.
Teachers
is with regards
strike.
to the teachers' strike.
Yes, this is a Star newspaper.
Yes.
And you see there are two unions represented in this picture here. There's KUPPET and there's KNUT.
Yes.
KNUT, before their strike commenced on Monday, they called it off. So it appears the KUPPET are looking at KNUT as the weakest link. That was a failure.
And that's why they're holding
They're
them
holding
up.
hands, but here there's no one to hold. They
Yeah.
disappeared.
There's nobody.
KNUT failed KUPPET, and as far as the teacher strike is concerned.
And as you can see, some of them actually seem to be running away.
Yes. Solidarity for who?
Yeah.
So it means that KNUT betrayed
not-
the cause.
Yeah. We have endorsed you as our new official opposition leader. That is Kalonzo.
This is the cartoon on the People Daily.
Yes.
So he's pointing at himself and saying, we
We.
have endorsed you. So he,
And did you see the we is in capital and bold?
we.
Yeah. Bold.
So he's declared himself the official opposition leader. He's also declared himself the Azimio leader.
Yep.
And he did not even attend Raila Odinga's official launch for his AUC
AUC
bid.
candidacy.
So he's a lone ranger.
Well, guess what? He's like, you know what? Baba can focus on Matters Africa. Me, I'm going to take care of this particular ship, with or without your blessings.
So definitely some interesting subjects to talk about, some interesting headlines, including the fight against corruption at the county level. That after the break with my panelists to stand by for this and a lot more coming later on. And of course, you can be part of this show throughout up until 10 a.m. through our social media pages on X at TV47 News and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya.
The hashtag is Morning Cafe TV47 at Shiksha Aurora and at Fred Indimuli. Talk to us. Tell us where you're watching from. Remember, coming up next is that very interesting conversation that Fred Indimuli will be having regarding matters state of the nation. We'll be speaking to some politicians. As you can see, Wilson Sosion, former MP, Kevin Osido, ED County Governance Watch, as well as Meshach Odede, who is a political commentator. I'm not sure if Daniel Orogo will
He
be
won't make it. He's come down
coming.
with something
Yes.
this morning, but the rest will be in studio. Do stand by for that after the break.
Hey there, friends! Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m. The Grind, where business meets brilliance. It's not just about the ideas.
I was working as a shampoo boy. I used to wash clients' hair on the sink.
It's about making them happen. From big wins.
In primary school, when we would be asked what people want to be, I was categorical that I want to be a nurse.
To hard lessons.
The consoles change, the gaming equipment keep changing.
We cover it all. Tune in to The Grind, where every episode is packed with insights.
The person who is serving customers, always be a customer-centric.
Strategies.
When you pay attention to detail, you get luxury items.
And stories to fuel your ambition. Don't just dream it, grind it. Mondays at 7:30 p.m.
Jiunge nasi tunapoangazia safari za viongozi bora. Kutoka kwa ushindi mkubwa hadi masomo magumu.
Wakati wetu kwamba wasichana si wa kusoma, ni wa kuolewa, ng'ombe ipatikane, wazazi wakuwa watajiri.
Tunashughulikia yote.
I wish I were a better investor.
My parents taught me how to look for things for myself.
Tazama Mfahamu Kiongozi, ambapo kila kipindi kimejaa maarifa, mikakati na hadithi za kukuza azma yako.
For me to succeed, I have to fight.
Kila Alhamisi saa 1:30.
Hey there, friends! Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic kids and autism, how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time.
All right, welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV 47 with me, Fred Indimuli. Time for us to take a look at the big headlines on the state of the nation. Matters to do with education and graft at the county level making headlines today. On the front page of the Standard, strike nightmare for schools as TSC warns teachers. That's a big story on the front page of the Standard. On the Nation, graft lord nailed 40 big fish next. And of course, quite some huge anticipation of sentencing of former Samburu Governor Moses Lenol Kulal later this morning following his conviction for corruption on an 83 million shilling graft case. Matters Education also making it to the front page of the Daily Nation. Stop bullying teachers, Kotu now tells TSC. Allow me to introduce my panelists this morning. Wilson Sosion, former Member of Parliament and also a one-time very fiery Secretary General of the Kenya National Union of Teachers. It's good to have you in studio. Karibu sana.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. Good morning, and good morning our viewers, wherever they will be.
Yes, next to Bwana Sosion, we have Kevin Osido, ED County Governance Watch. Karibu sana.
Shukran, asante.
Bwana Mesha Kudede will be joining us shortly, but before he does that, let's focus probably on the teachers issue, Bwana Sosion. And if you look at the cartoon on the Star, if my director can help me with that, the cartoon on the Star today paints both unions that represent teachers. It's there next to you, Bwana Sosion, right here. We have KUPPET in yellow and KNUT in green. KNUT is a union that you represented or you worked for quite a long time as Secretary General. This one here seems to suggest that KNUT has let down the other teachers in as far as solidarity in the kind of industrial action they've taken this time round. Do you agree with this assessment that KNUT let down the other teachers in something that probably they would have pushed together for?
No, I don't. Those are varied opinions, and unions are free and independent entities that take decisions on their own. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are aware KNUT had a meeting last Sunday, and they deliberated for a long time, and they arrived at a decision to call off the strike. KUPPET had a similar meeting, and they agreed to proceed with the strike. Those are two different independent entities taking their own decisions. What I want us to appreciate here is what the damage that previous regimes have done to the teaching profession by dividing the teaching profession. And if you get back to history, teachers were divided up to 1957, and that is when late President Moi moved a freelance motion to help the teachers to have one union so that they can speak with one voice. That was a decision in 1957. It did happen. NAT was born, and it engaged in various activities, various organized actions, organizing teachers and organizing. And the Kenyan teachers have been the most well-organized in Africa since pre-independence up to post-independence. And we saw NAT engage in industrial actions in 62, 63 to demand for better terms and conditions of service, and in 1965 and 66 to demand for one employer. And arguably, in the whole of Africa and the entire world, it is only Kenya that has a strongest centralized employer, which was granted independent powers in the year 2010 through the Constitution. The history of what teachers have done through one united front is clear. But the state, after 1997, powerful industrial action, which coincided with the elections of 1997, started the divide and rule, and we can see this division. What I see here is division, deliberate division of teachers.
Weakness as a direct result of the division.
Yes, and that is not right. Any country that is a united and organized teaching workforce will also have quality outcomes in education. That is what it is. Okay. We were number one sometimes back in global competitiveness in education delivery, but in terms of access and quality. In Africa, we were number one because we had one strong voice at that time. That was KNUT. But with this division that we've witnessed over time, with the divided and disorganized teaching force, then we've dropped down to number 7. We don't hear strong professional conversations coming from the teaching force anymore. Like teachers no longer participate actively in discussing the curriculum and other professional matters and how to improve standards. If you reduce them to bread and butter and sort of type of cheap competition of this nature, then I don't think it is in the best interest of the country. So what we are witnessing is the historical machination and busting of teachers.
Okay, and as we continue with this conversation, allow me to welcome onto the set Mesha Kodede, political commentator, so that you can also have a chance to contribute to this debate. Of course, the entire education sector is facing some crisis of some sort, if I may call it that. Not just with the striking teachers, both represented by KUPPET and KNUT, but even at the university level with the funding model, back to basic education, capitation in schools. Across board, as a sector, education in Kenya appears to either be grossly mismanaged or suffering some sort of issue that we cannot explain. What is your assessment of what's happening to the education sector this year?
Thank you so much, Fred and the team. And what is happening to the education sector is such a nasty mismanagement and lack of effective engagement, communication among stakeholders, and much more fundamentally, the degree to which the people who have been entrusted with the responsibility to run and manage education in Kenya have more or less left their coats off the hook. And that really, in my view, is something that if we are not very careful, Fred, is going to mess up even the future of this country. And the future is because most of the people who are in schools and the people who are coming in schools really rely on education to be the foundation of posterity, progress, and really many frameworks within engagements of communities. But to the degree to which we no longer see a very level-headed commitment, both from government to other stakeholders, particularly from the unions and associations, that is denting the kind of expectation that Kenyans have to be able to receive certain services from the education sector. And this is not just happening today, as Mheshimiwa Sosion has given us the historical background. I still keep asking myself, what is the education strategy for reforms in Kenya, to the level that every cabinet secretary that comes into office has his or her own way of running and managing the education sector? What is this thing that we are missing, that we therefore need to come up with and fix? There are concerns around government's commitment to the CBS that have been signed from historical moments to date. Why isn't there a commitment by government to respect the CBS Why isn't there a commitment by government to effectively communicate to the teachers or to the various stakeholders, with the exception of when strike notices are issued? Because there has to be a communication strategy. That yes, since this time we have been engaging on this particular CBA process, as a government we are committed to honoring ABCD, but because of certain things that are either beyond us or that we cannot commit to right now, we want to ask that we defer ABCD commitments to a certain time. And then when you say integrity requires that when you say it to a certain time, you actually meet those obligations, and that if you cannot, then you communicate. So teachers do not have to issue strike notices that really dent the expectations of learners and students from schools for things to be done. Okay. And so in my view, there is such a lackluster management of the school, of the schools, of the education sector, that does not give us very ample confidence to be able to have the commitment that Kenyans expect from the government. Okay. And in my view, I think that therefore we need to call for probably a national conference on education sector reforms in this country. It is not enough for the president to be undertaking, quick fix measures. For example, we have had issues with the new banding for education system, the new structures that are being put in place to be able to deal with education, particularly for higher education levels. And the president calls for a town hall, and we imagine that is not enough. These quick fix mechanisms that we have adopted lately, Fred, in my view, will continue to dent the expectations of not just the learners in schools, but indeed all the other education stakeholders. And given, looking at it as it therefore may, is something that is going to begin to draw people out of schools. It's beginning to draw people from the kind of commitment that Kenyans have in the education sector.
Bwana Meshak Odede, karibu sana to TV47. It would appear that the sector, which is the biggest spend in our budget, over 650 billion shillings annually, operates more or less like a Tower of Babel. Everyone is speaking from different directions. MPs are now talking about whether or not to amalgamate their bursaries, as if that's the only argument. The president finds himself in a position to having to go down to explain simple formulas on how to calculate how much you'll pay to university, and he has to do it directly because people are not communicating as they should. So much is happening. Teachers are disjointed. The two unions are not seeing eye to eye. The TSC is supposed to sign a CBA or sign a return to work formula with KUPPET. It's not. And this is a key sector in this country. That is akin to extreme mismanagement from this administration, don't you agree?
Thank you, Fred, and thanks to our viewers. Fred, I have three things to actually underscore on the issue of teachers. Number one, whoever it is who brought the idea of having two unions, according to me, made a mistake. This union needed to have remained one union of the teaching fraternity from primary and high schoolers. Because the moment there are two, it is easy to compromise one section. Okay, today we could talk about the KUPPET, or we could talk about NAT, but according to me, it should have been one big unit that speaks one voice, and that voice is louder enough. Number two, I personally think the space of teachers and unions have been over-politicized. I think there's a lot of politics going on, even between the teachers, the two unions themselves, because of that politics, the government is also playing the same politics. So sometimes teachers give earlier notice and the government is just quiet about it until they realize today is Sunday and tomorrow is Monday and the strike begins tomorrow. Then they rush very quickly to call the union officials on the table and try to rush something around there. And that is how sometimes we miss a lot of important things on the table, because the government comes on the table last minute with a feeling that we have to strike this deal. Like, these people have to go to school tomorrow. The strike has to be called off today. today, so that the whole country can see we are doing something. So that is how they sometimes accept some things they know very well they are not going to do. For the sake of cameras which are out there and we are in the room and the whole country is waiting so that we tell them what has happened with this meeting. Remember, sometimes when they are in those boardrooms, the cameras are out there and it is a news, it is a story. We want to tell Kenyans, what have you decided? There was a meeting between the ministry or labor and the teachers, and we want to know what's the result of this meeting. So by virtue of seeking that result so much, sometimes the government, for the sake of those cameras, they accept things they know very well they are not going to do. They know very well is not possible for that particular time. And then we start asking, what have you done about what we agreed? And the teachers keep on asking until they give another notice. So that is number two. Then the third one, which I think is the most important thing, the issue of teachers have been left for teachers. And parents are not even playing any role about teacher strike or the well-being of teachers who teach their children. This is the reason why I'm saying that. Anytime you will see a big conversation in the country around our education sector, it is when it touches on the fees that goes to parents directly, and now parents are feeling the pain of either overpaying or they are burdened or something. But I have never listened to a big discussion among parents about the well-being of teachers. If it is a strike notice given by teachers, KNUT, KUPPET, and all those, it is a conversation that is strictly with teachers and the ministry or government. And I have never seen parents coming out, or parents are big stakeholders in the education sector. But I don't know whether I have missed it. Trust me, I have never seen parents coming out in large numbers to support teachers and say, we are with teachers on this, so that the government can actually take those steps seriously. When it is about teachers' well-being, it is about teachers' conversation with government. Only when it is about school fees and things that are on parents strictly, then you see the whole nation is out talking about the
And your sentiments have been captured on this story on the back page of the Daily Nation. They say the union, this is KUPPET, has called on parents to support the ongoing strike, and they've issued a warning. They say that any parent who decides to send their child to school is assuming full responsibility for their well-being. But back to you, Bwana Sosion, on the issue of unions. Do you think that probably it's a quality of union leadership? Because there has been criticism that has been directed towards the leadership of the KNUT for calling off the strike.
No,
some of the members are even saying that was wrong.
It is not the quality. Even if we talk the quality, how did the leadership get there? We know government has manipulated even leadership of various unions. That's a fact for
even
sure.
the allure of politics.
Yes,
some of you are drawn from union leadership into politics.
Manipulated by the Teacher Service Commission. Let's not say government. That was Jubilee administration that did all this drama and intensified the busting and wars on union. I remember as SG, I had to run the union for 36 months without money because somebody at TSC, the TSC itself and government decided to switch off the union because they thought the union was growing too strong. Teachers were seriously listening to the union, students were listening to the union, and parents were listening to the union, and that even the employer could not implement any policy without consultation of the union. But you see, when the union is strong, that is it. But then, back to this scenario that we have, if we have to look at it, I've said number one, the cause is TSC. TSC has instead of building working and productive industrial relations and appreciating a united teaching force, it has engaged in divide and rule mechanisms. It has even created a third union for teachers teaching with disabilities and teachers teaching special needs education, because you cannot have that kind of segregation. And it's not trying to reduce the unions to occupational unions, rather than a general union where teachers can speak in one voice as it has been in the past. And what TSC does not recognize is that when they destroy unions, TSC in effect is destroying itself. So the buck stops squarely at the doorstep of the Teacher Service Commission, that of the chair commissioners and the CEO. This is an inept group of team that is rudderless. And when you look at the latest issues, for example, the CBA, it is signed and deposited in court, and it is certificated by Salaries and Remuneration Commission. And TSC has constitutional powers to advise the national government according to its functions and powers, and therefore it should have engaged government early enough and saved the CBA, because this was payment of phase 2. It is signed, it's in court. And there is no way government, for whatever reasons, whether it's the death of finance bill or whatever anything, this obligation must be met. It was unnecessary, uncalled for. It is something that could have been avoided. If teachers were assured from the beginning that this would be paid, we wouldn't be where we are. Why do you create in drama until you wait for pressure, then you do the same thing that legally you are supposed to do it? Then number 2, the issue of intern teachers. I think the president has made it very clear. It's public knowledge. But then, do you have to wait until there is frontier of pressure so that you can engage in some certain clarifications or actions? These are things that, of course, the national government has already availed money. But TSC failed in communicating effectively to her workers. And that is what precipitated the pressure that we have. Non-remittances of third-party deductions. The teacher circles are collapsing because some of the circles have not received deductions and remittances from teachers for as close to 4-5 months. That's a serious issue. Okay. A teacher who is placed on CRB from the banks and from the circles will definitely not settle. And that is the mandate and responsibility of Teacher Service Commission as provided by law to effect these deductions and remit by the 3rd day of the month. It is there in law. If it hasn't done it, then TSC management has no business being in place. Number 4, if teachers are contesting the tools that have been used for promotion, and I remember when yours truly was SG, I took this matter to court, and it was ruled that a tool called Career Progression Guidelines, CBG, which TSC was applying, was not approved by Parliament. And you cannot promote teachers using tools that are illegal, that are not approved by Parliament. And this tool that is being used has denied many teachers promotion. And the president has allocated money and has directed TSC that it must open doors for both direct and indirect promotions. And by saying so, it meant that the CBG tools could not apply. Why is TSC using illegal tools that are not approved, that countermands the provisions of the Code of Regulations for teachers, which is very clear on how teachers are promoted? And then medical scheme, it is a duty of TSC to ensure that the service provider, which they procure themselves, the service provider is procured by TSC and paid using the medical allowances for teachers. So when teachers demand for quality health care for themselves and for their children, and it's yours truly who really midwife these group medical cover and has seen teachers well treated and well handled in terms of healthcare. And when teachers raise issues about non-payment of service providers, how do you expect service providers who are contracted to deliver services when you don't remit their due money? So when you look at consolidated all these issues, it points to a commission that has collapsed, that is not delivering services to teachers, and the philosophy of independence of TSC is not imperial powers of commissioners and CEO, but it is professional freedom of teachers to enjoy the best quality services and remain accountable to the people of Kenya.
Therefore leaves the question, why did KNUT call off the strike? But we'll handle that after the break.
But before that.
Let's take a short break. We'll be back with that.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child.
And we're back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV 47. We continue with the State of the Nation. My name is Fred Indemuli. I'm still in studio with Wilson Sosion, a former MP and also former SG of KNUT, that's the National Union of Teachers. Kevin Osido, ED County Governance Watch, and Mesha Kodede, political commentator, joining this conversation as well. Yes, I interrupted you just before the...
Yeah, you interrupted me as I finished. When you talk of a strike, if 5% of teachers can engage in strike action, there is a strike. If 10% engage in strike action, there is a strike. 20%, 30%. But in this case, if we look at it in the context of the two unions, NAT have called off, but the grievances are the same.
And they are still
there. They have not
vacated
the grievances. Yes, they have not. They have not vacated the grievances.
So do you fault KNUT for calling off the strike?
No, I don't fault. I don't fault them for calling off. You can call off and still continue talking. That doesn't mean you've betrayed anybody. You can call off, continue demanding. That is the option, the route they chose. And then KUPPET chose to continue with the strike. But they are still talking about the same things. So then, if KUPPET are on strike, and that is almost 50% of teachers are not on strike, then the entire teaching service is on strike. And what needs to be done, and this brings me to what Francis Atwoli yesterday said, it is wrong for TSC to try and paralyze the strike using the courts. That is misusing our criminal justice system against legitimate entities like unions. There is nothing difficult with calling the unions on the table and signing a return to work formula based on the particular grievances that teachers have raised. Okay. That is the only way you can restore order, industrial order, and get teachers to work in third term. But if we are handing back teachers who are bitter and disenchanted to go back to class, then they can retract their spirit and hearts from teaching. Okay. And if our teachers can retract their hearts and spirits from teaching, then we are prepared, then we should prepare for the biggest disaster, poor education outcomes. And we'll continue dropping in global competitiveness. So the fact is, there is a strike.
But there
is a strike within the teaching service. And
you talked about pressure.
There is need for a return to work formula.
Okay.
And even proper engagements of the two unions by the employer.
The issue is when you talk about pressure, probably KNUT did not have much to hold against TSC. There's no national exam this third term. KUPPET at least has KCSE to look forward to, and they can use that to hold even TSC at ransom. Do you think that this could have forced KNUT into a corner? You have nothing really to fight over?
Friend, I believe that that really is where the problem begins. The inability of the unions to speak together, particularly based on the common issues. So they must be able to understand, or rather to agree on their common issues. And as I said earlier on, a lack of a clear engagement strategy, because this engagement strategy goes further even into looking at the risks associated with all these processes, both for NAT and also KUPPET. And some of these risks really border on, for instance, when teachers have had to get into schools and drive away learners and teachers, and you never know what might happen at that point. The risks border on engagement on the streets. On Monday, when the strikes began, I was in Kisii town, and you can imagine the levels of, for instance, traffic jam, inversion of people who are not even teachers, you know, and shops had to be closed within a very, you know, little amount of time. And many things that happen when strikes or demonstrations or protests are happening. So in my view, whether NAT or KUPPET, the inability of the unions to agree and come to a common table for an understanding of what really the issues are, which we know. The issues are like this, the teachers have this kind of feeling. Beyond that, there are also the learners and the students. And then you've also mentioned the examinations. What does that mean to the preparedness of both the learners, the teachers, and even the entire school environment to prepare these learners for the exams?
Okay.
The government needs to begin to think through how to deal with issues. And it cannot be that in this country, Fred, every week, every day, every month, we are having strikes. Whether it is from Gen Zs, whether it is from boda riders, whether it is from, you know, these digital drivers, whether it is from matatu operators, whether it is from civil society on the Constitution of Kenya at 14, it cannot be that we are having demonstrations and strikes as a last resort. Of course, by Constitution of Kenya, it is a last resort, but it therefore means that there is something that is supposed to be happening which is not being done or which is not happening. And one of that thing is a communication aspect. So the pressure that we are seeing is a semblance of something rocking down under the boats and the tables, and someone is sleeping on how to be able to deal with those issues. And we are hoping that government will begin to stop talking from high echelons, you know, and come down to the levels of the stakeholders, both NAT and KUPPET, and especially that the union leaders will agree on what the common fronts are, and therefore be able to find a mechanism to engage with government.
And of course, as we wrap up this conversation on education matters and teachers' strikes, we cannot ignore the fact that the union leadership has come under a lot of criticism about their temerity, their tenacity, the quality of union leadership we have. And when Sosion has taken us through the history, there appears to be a difference in how unions, even the central union, court to itself in how they're handling workers' issues. Do you think that that's the problem, probably the kind of relationship we have with unions and politics, that could have compromised the kind of work unions do?
Yeah, I actually think so, but because as an outsider, I would not say with authenticity. I don't know whether at this particular point in time, there is a conversation also going on between KUPPET and NAT about the same issues, because like you had Honorable Sosion say, the issues are the same from both ends. And the government is on this other side, the TSC and the unions. One union is deciding now to go on with the conversation while the work is going on. Another union says there is no work that is going to go on, it is only the conversation. So at this point in time, it makes some of us wonder whether the two unions, are there some things they are agreeing on apart from the issues that are the same? Are they, how, if they could agree on the issues which are the grievances, how is it possible that they can't agree on the method of handling those particular things? Because it tells a lot about that disagreement between the two unions. So again, at this point in time, you do not even understand now as a country the role of KOTU in all this, because on the other side, much as Mheshimiwa Atwoli says the things he says, but at the back of the mind of every Kenyan feel like he is more on the side of government than ever before. So whether he says things, it looks like, oh, he's just saying that, but we know the truth. So we need to move from the side where when a figure like Honorable Atwoli speaks, then Kenyans can tell that, yeah, okay, this is the position of COTU, the central organization. And the COTU is actually with the teachers. But here he might say what he says, but at the back of my mind, everything looks like he is actually on the other side. He is just trying to pacify things. Yeah. So I think that the way the whole team of COTU, Kupet and Nat have managed the whole thing also leaves a lot to be questioned.
Okay.
But that does not mean they are wrong in demanding the things they are demanding.
Yes, the teacher strike continues on its fourth day, of course led by the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers. That's after KNUT called off the strike only a day before it was set to kick off. Allow us to move to another conversation now, away from matters education. This is also big news and it features on all the dailies this morning. The face of the former governor of Samburu, Moses Lenol Kulal, is there on the front page of the Daily Nation, the People Daily and the Standard. This big story on the front page of the Daily Nation, Graft Lord nailed. A bit harsh, but it is a headline there. 40 big fish next. Now, the former Samburu governor, Lenol Kulal, faces a long jail term after conviction for corruption, even as 40 other former and sitting county bosses face graft cases involving over 100 billion shillings. Now, Lenol Kulal spent last night in custody after he was denied bail ahead of sentencing this morning, suffering the ignominy of being the first governor tried and convicted after an abortive attempt by the Director of Public Prosecutions to withdraw the case. Now, so many things in that short paragraph. One, this could just be the very first governor to be convicted and jailed as we await the sentencing this time around. It says a lot about the fight against corruption. The other issue is the fact that the Director of Public Prosecutions had attempted to withdraw the case just before the conviction. Sosion, what's your take on this? This could just be
one thing as a country is that we've got very weak mechanisms of punishing and dealing with corruption. And we have institutionalized corruption. And in fact, I can pick it from you when you say this one a bit harsh, grand loads nailed for big fish, and you say it's a bit harsh, then I would think you also think we do not need to go hard on corruption. Let me say, countries that have prospered economically, they've put in place strong mechanisms in terms of strong laws that can be dispensed of very quickly. If you are arraigned in court, like the Asian tigers, I've been to Malaysia, Singapore, and many of those countries. We talk of Korea, and we keep praising them, that they've gone very far. The first thing that they've done is to eliminate corruption. And if you are arraigned in court for corruption charges, that matter is dispensed of within hours. And the sentence communicated. And that sentence often is death sentence. In fact, it's go to China, you steal and you will see death sentence. It is punished and it must be punished. The president the other said the problem of this country are two things: incompetent leadership in public institutions, conflict of interest and corruption. So if this is true and those who contest to be governors and are elected as governors, they're looking for short ways of being rich. And if our court system and would like to have very effective criminal justice system to punish corruption, this matter of Samburu, how long has it taken in court? Must we take ages prosecuting cases in court? I think, number one, the judiciary should be effective in dealing with matters of corruption. And they should not take very long, take a very short time. And we must have strong laws to enable the judiciary and to enable government institutions identify and punish corruption. And therefore, the conviction of Samburu governor, we want to see the type of conviction that really is going to face. And any other governor and any other Kenyan involved in corruption. Because when we institutionalize corruption, anybody who occupies any office, whether in private or in public, will have a mindset of executing corruption one way or the other. That's the problem that we have.
And of course,
but then we must punish. We must talk against it. The media must be at the forefront in fighting.
That's the issue.
Those in government must be, the judiciary must expedite and severely punish.
Yes, and that's what every Kenyan has been calling for. But we've seen over the years that many governors have been taken to court. Not just governors, other public officers as well have been taken to court on one matter or the other, but eventually it doesn't amount to much. And even here, according to this story, there was an attempt by the Director of Public Prosecutions, just like that office has done previously, to withdraw this case. Yet the court still went ahead and managed to get a conviction. That is a game changer in itself.
Yeah, definitely it is. And it speaks to the kind of let me call it judicial progression that we are beginning to see against the normalization of the war on graft or the war on corruption. And that therefore means that if you have probably observed the institutions that are lately touted to be rendering citizens a bit of confidence and trust, especially in governance and leadership sector, the judiciary is slowly coming up the ladder, even against the legislature and indeed even the executive, insofar as service delivery is concerned. And that is really, it gives Kenyans a lot of hope to begin to think that probably we are getting to the level of winning the war on corruption, despite the fact that very many challenges still exist. And some of those challenges include the timelines for dealing with corruption cases. Sometimes I get surprised, Fred, because in our country, you go to the villages, and for those of us who visit our rural homes, many times you will be given stories of what is happening. And you know, so-and-so's son went and took somebody's cuckoo or a goat. They were taken to the chief. And within a span of 2 days, the matter is already settled and it is dealt with, whether the person is in court or the person is in some jail somewhere. The matter is hastened very fast. But in Kenya, you talk about 100 billion. Do you know what 100 billion shillings can do? That is money which is enough to finance service delivery sectors in counties. In fact, more than 18 counties for 2 years. But we are talking a former governor. We are talking 40 former and sitting governors. That is quite disheartening. It is a huge loss to us, and therefore, the concern is in how institutions of governance will be able to come up like the judiciary to begin to deal with such heinous vices like corruption. And it is because corruption is what is eating all the sectors of service delivery in this country. And so we are hoping that this landslide, if I could call it, case, as we are hoping for the sentencing, of course, quite discouraging that it has also taken a long time. It's not the first time, we know. It's neither the first time nor is it the last that we'll be having this kind of a conversation going on. Just a few days ago, Fred, we had the vetting of cabinet secretaries, and we had a former governor being asked concerns around a case that is supposedly meant to have been, dealt with in total. But the gentleman said, I have never even been, talked to by EACC. Mm-hmm. I have never encountered them. I only hear about their stories on TV. That really dents the confidence and trust that Kenyans have in institutions of governance that are therefore should be at the forefront of the war on graft. Okay. And so if we can be able to begin to talk about strengthening institutions of governance like EACC, even DCI, the DPP, so that avenues for withdrawing or pulling off cases should not be there, because we know the process of adjudicating some of these cases. When you pick evidence, how come within a span of time you now begin to say there is no evidence or that evidence is weak? I think there are lessons also that we begin to accrue and to draw from these kind of cases that should inform how we move forward in terms of protecting the trust and confidence.
If we could focus on the DPP for a moment, it's been very much publicized, the number of cases that office has withdrawn. And many people have been appointed to public office on the strength of cases against them being withdrawn by the DPP. Yes. Now we are seeing a case that the DPP thought should ideally be withdrawn, going ahead and the court getting a conviction on the same. It means that therefore we could have gotten a lot more convictions on some of these cases that were eventually withdrawn by the DPP. What does that say about that office?
Thank you, Fred. Allow me to take a different position that for me this was not a big news. We have seen news like this before in this country, and without any prejudice, cases like the cases against Honorable Weluke, how did it die? Where is it? There were convictions. I mean, people are wondering, this is quite a number of years.
Even sentenced.
I mean, it's not even close to this. That was huge. But he went, got elected, he's in parliament. I mean, we don't know where that went. So even this will pass. Just like the Bible says,
don't think he'll spend
when the time is right, the courts will do it again. The reason why for me it's not even a big thing, this was a magistrate. Imagine how this will go all the way to Supreme Court if they decide. And we don't know the resources they are using. Maybe they are using the same money. Who knows? And then how our judicial system is organized. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. Lawyers will actually have to explain to some of us who did not go to law school to make us understand why judges would go to the same school, learn the same curriculum and the same syllabus, and then one judge sees this is it. I mean, the other judge sees it is not. Lawyers went to school with them in the same Kenya School of Law, but they all come to differ on the same table. This lawyer argued well, so the judge gave it a yes. That lawyer argued badly, the judge gave it a no. And all these suckers.
Except that when you become a judge now, you move to the Judicial Training Institute.
Yes,
so
and all these
is
suckers.
different.
So I am only imagining the former governor of Samburu, right now as we speak, probably is in court somewhere with his lawyers trying to appeal. And that appeal will return him to the normal, usual thing, and then that appeal will go and go and go. But Fred, one concern for us Kenyans who are not lawyers is this thing of, I mean, the country is like we are stuck in between a hard place and a rock, because I know you have stolen my laptop and I know where it is, but I can't go to court to adduce evidence until the court tells how that evidence must be obtained. Mm-hmm. So I know where the laptop is, I know who stole it, I know, who is using it, but I can't walk to the court with any evidence that court did not prescribe how I should get the evidence. Isn't it just how we justify? Because if I am now the governor of my county, Migori, I know, and I am a lawyer, for example, I will know how to hide all those evidence and not let you access it, because I know how you should access it. I know what the law says, that when you are accessing it as evidence, you will follow this route and not this. So all the routes you will follow, I have blocked, and you will not access this and take to court as evidence. So I can sit pretty and know whether I am using your cup, which I stole, you will never take me to court, you will never win.
Do you share in this pessimism that we may get excited about all these things, but it will amount to nothing?
Before we get that out of the way, Fred, we will never win any war against corruption, because people who steal are lawyers who knows what is happening. They know how the government will follow this and where they will reach and how they will be blocked, and that is it.
Yes, Bwana Association.
Corruption is driven by cartels, and these cartels will influence and control institutions. Mm-hmm. They will influence the legislature, the architecture of the laws that are being made. Mm-hmm. They will drive, they will sponsor these laws, and in fact, cartels transcend regimes. Mm-hmm. From one regime to the next, you will still see them running the show. And they also control the judiciary. The judiciary cannot be absolved from corruption in itself. In fact, it is the biggest potential platform of corruption. How do you explain somebody being convicted, and within a short time you can appeal in another court?
Yes.
And that judgment is thrashed, and we all come back to zero. It is cartels taking control. Those who execute corruption will control every institution.
Are we saying
we'll
we've lost
try
the
to
war on
control
corruption
the
completely
executive
because of this
They
cartels?
will try to control the parliament, and they will try and control the judiciary. Let me come back to the judiciary. That is what we call people have urged. And in fact, that is what the Gen Zs raised. The Gen Z's agenda was so good before it was spoiled by political interest. The agenda was so good. Fight corruption and save the economy. And many people have said, Kenyan economy is so resilient. If it has been a victim of corruption right from independence to date, and it is still struggling, assuming we fought corruption and took it to zero from 1963, we will be moving almost to the, not just middle income, but we'll be joining the league of the first world countries, those who have done so. That is what we call expeditious and meticulous fight of corruption. The judiciary must be rough, must be effective, must be efficient, and it should not be very, very easy to grant options of relief to those who involve themselves in corruption. I've told you what happens in other jurisdictions. If you are convicted of corruption at 9 a.m., by 3 p.m., you have been handed a sentence, and possibly death sentence. And that is not appealable. The chapter is closed, and you are forgotten. And so you get citizens, they don't practice corruption at all. I took a lot of time to spend time in many ministries in Malaysia. And you look at how people work, so committed. Even people government officers who work in government office, they put on uniform and work throughout the day, so committed, implementing the strategic plan, the 5-year strategic plan of government, which is reviewed midway, and those strategic plans must succeed. But here, we talk of an agenda for the people in year 1. Year 2, we have lost it. Year 3, we are talking about something else. Year 4, we've lost focus. So, I very, very strongly, there are 2 things that must be done. The judiciary must be vicious. And we want to see what it is going to do with this particular one and others. The DPP, the Director of Public Prosecution Office, should not be compromised for whatever reason. It must be facilitated, it must be enabled, and that the President has enabled the police to do its work with the independence of accounting in terms of doing its work. So people who are suspected to be involved in corruption, the DPP must conduct thorough investigation and get facts, because a judge can only prosecute a case on facts of law. And you must make it easy for a judge, so that a judge can take a short time to give a conviction, so that we punish these characters.
Yeah.
And if we punish these characters, we will build a strong culture of strong values and value systems.
We will get there someday, but for now it would appear there's
not
a lot
someday.
Of
why can't we get there now?
Why can't we get them? I'm just taking it from you guys.
Why are you saying someday?
It's just what you've just
Don't you have the urgency to have this thing done now?
Do you share in this
skepticism? Because if we have the urgency to
do you share in this skepticism that this may look so good and probably excite Kenyans, but it will amount to nothing? Do you share in that?
Fred, I don't share in that. And why I say that is because this is a journey, and we are walking it step by step, day by day, week by week, and year by year. There's going to be a day when corrupt individuals will be stopped, and not just stopped, they are going to be convicted, and if not jailed, probably even rendered death sentenced. And I'm saying this because if you look at the degree of agency that is currently being driven by the citizens, especially the name calling, the kusalimiana that is happening. We have more or less installed and institutionalized corruption. And there is a foundation upon which corruption in this country is built. And that foundation is called politicization of corruption. And that is why all the mega corruption cases that we are hearing about involve big politicians, including the one we are talking about. Remember, we are talking about a former governor and 40 former and sitting. You see? So it means that there is a foundation that corruption is resting on, and it is feeling very comfortable. But Kenyans are beginning to reverse this trend by understanding the losses that we are getting. Especially, as I said earlier on, what can 100 billion shillings do? If we begin to go out there and politically educate Kenyans and tell them, by the way, do you know how many roads 100 billion or 83 million from the case of Governor Leonard Kulal can be able to do in this small ward of yours? Kenyans will begin to see what we are losing at the doorstep of corruption and corrupt individuals. But it is politicization because the more money you have in this country, the higher chances of you being elected president, being elected governor, being elected whatever office that you want. And so that if Kevin Osido wants to be governor of Nairobi City County or for Siaya County, I have to show that I can be able to buy people using monies that I have stolen, because everyone knows how much I earn as executive director of County Governance Watch. And for me to be governor, I probably need more than 40 million, if not 8 million plus, going to 220 to run a small city. Where do they expect me to get this money? And so to the extent that we begin to change the attitude of Kenyans to give corruption a very bad name, and that institutions of governance like DCI, DPP, even the judiciary will be able to do their work effectively, then we will get to this level where Mheshimiwa Sosion is talking about. Look at the political culture of the Asian tigers. They don't vote like we do. Their political system is not like ours. You are talking about China. China is an autocratic state. We are a democratic state. They don't campaign for their elections. And that is why the institutions rest on the power that Kenyans have given to them, that if you are sentenced, we are going to kill you, and that it is known by everyone. Here in Kenya, arrest this gentleman as an example and take him to EACC. Everybody from Migori County will come. They will get all the buses and all the tuk-tuks, and they'll be like, that is our thief. Why are you arresting him? And he is building, as you know, every time he comes home on weekends, he is giving boda people fuel, he is giving teachers, he is even hosting parties at his home. So you see the degree to which we have loved and embraced corruption. It is therefore very difficult, even for the judges, because as judges also debate and provide their judgments based on the context. When they see a big crowd outside the court and saying, release him, he is our thief, where will you go to sleep? You must get into a chopper and run away from this mob for you to be safe.
I wanted to say something briefly.
Please do.
Thank you. Fred, on matters DPP offices and DCI, for example, I think it is time they change their tact a little. We have seen in more progressive worlds where agencies, for example, like FBI, will take even 5 years following one individual until they get everything intact and locked. Then they can come to you and say, Fred, we have this on you, and now you either accept you are guilty or we go through the process. This is what we have on you. And some of them walk on their own now to go and plead guilty, and then the charges are read. And so you realize in their system, sometimes the case is taken to court today, and in a week or a month, the conviction is done. Everything about that case is forgotten because we have settled. Here, the DPP, DCI will run after you so fast, and then you are taken to court, and then they stand in court saying, give us more time to go and investigate. I mean, what the hell is that? That is what we do every now and then. So why were they even arresting you if they didn't have anything? Because we have seen many times and times again, them asking the judge to give them more time to lock this man and give us more. So why did you even bring that man there in the first place? So I urge them to just follow. Even if you're following someone for 2 years, please do. But when you finally get them to the judge, let's just say in a week or a month's time, this case is done with.
Only that, Fred, if you allow me for just a minute, for avenues where those institutions will ask for more time, they need to give Kenyans an explanation. Either it is a capacity issue or this gentleman has run away and is not accessible. Because why would a small, a case of that nature take such a long time? Remember that BBI actually had proposed that for all corruption cases, they should go up to a maximum of 2 years. Why would a case run for 5 years, Meshach, especially if you have proper mechanisms, capacity of human resources?
And actually, Fred, even if we need parliamentarians to adjust this in the law, let's say, make a cut-off point where if your case is dealing with 100 million and above, you cannot be taken to magistrate's court. Let's take them to either Court of Appeal straight and go to Supreme Court. Because this whole system...
I disagree.
This whole system...
I disagree. Any court should be able to punish corruption upon...
But we have the appeal mechanism which will drag.
The moment you are a court and a judicial institution, regardless of the ranks and level, you have the competency and jurisdiction and capacity to dispense of that matter and punish it.
Why are we not doing that with presidential elections? Why is it going direct to the Supreme Court?
Irreversibly. Now, just allow me now. You've had your time. Time talking, I think, is a good thing. Idimuli, the president has spoken, and I think I buy it from there as a custodian of the Constitution and the laws of this country. And the president said, fight against corruption was weaponized against individuals politically, because give a dog a bad name and hang it. That is what was done, and that is bastardizing the fight against corruption. And that then, as a country, we should now institutionalize the fight against corruption. And I buy what the president has said, as stated, and I think a few days ago when unveiling the broad-based government, he said corruption is an item that the government is going to fight, and that one, he will require that expeditiously Parliament pass certain laws that is going to empower the judiciary. So number one, we need strong enabling laws so that any judge coming face to face with a corruption matter has the instruments to execute and do that one, so that the DPP can have powers to do that. In the absence of such laws, then it's not going to be easy. Number two, we need judicial capacity to do that. Judicial capacity in the sense of the number of charges, in the sense of properly financing the judicial processes to be able to do that, and even the investigative arm, so that it is not a matter that is doubted. You know, lawyers can argue. Law is gray, and you can argue. That is why there is room to debate, and there is a judge to take a decision, and all of them are judicial officers, from the judge to the lawyers. But then, where there is capacity to prosecute expeditiously that matter within a very short time and arrive at a judgment, will be able to fight corruption. Otherwise, it will continue to be interfered with cartels, and even these cartels can overthrow government. It can remove you as a president. It can remove anyone. So I think let's agree, number one, do we have the urgency to end corruption now? Let's agree, yes. Let us not say we'll reduce. I've seen people say, no, let us reduce corruption at least to 50%. I want us to live in that.
Because
we have the urgency to do it, let us have the laws in place, let us have the judicial system, have that capacity, let us have the prosecution of government and investigative agencies be able to do that. Let us punish it now, not tomorrow.
As we finish our conversation, even as we continue with talking about corruption and everything else, I want us to tie it to the Constitution. Today, being 29th of August, it means it is exactly 14 years and 2 days since the promulgation of the Constitution 2010. A lot of what we're talking about, many people had hoped that that would be remedied. A lot of the ills we're talking about would have been remedied by this Constitution. It is 14 years later. We found out the weaknesses in this Constitution, the loopholes, and what needs to be adjusted. Yet despite at least 5 or 6 attempts to amend the Constitution, they have all failed. Right now we see the kind of working relationship between the two biggest parties in Parliament, ODM, UDA, or Kenya Kwanza, and one wonders, is it time to actually seriously pursue an amendment to the Constitution? I see a story on page 7 of the Daily Nation. It says, in as far as law change is concerned, Ruto Raila hope to succeed where Uhuru failed. You mentioned BBI and what it would have, what it proposed in dealing with corruption. Do you think there's a best opportunity to pursue such?
Yes, I agree. And in saying so is because at 14, I am way sure that the Constitution is ready and ripe for a review. And that review needs to begin from an audit perspective. And in auditing the Constitution, it has to go beyond the narratives that we have had from certain quarters. For example, that the Constitution is very expensive. And the expensive nature of the implementation is largely drawn from what I would call a political structure. And people are looking at, for instance, 47 county governments. Are we really able to finance the counties based on, for example, the challenges that we have heard about? Now, I want to move it closer because we might not have a proper time. You mentioned the broad-based government, the structure that we have and is operating in the country today. It is a little bit shocking that we actually have opposition and government working together, and that is largely because of a gap of the Constitution. That Kenya is, for example, such a very strict presidential system, where we have a majority and a minority. We have a government side and then we have the opposition side. But if you move closer to parliament and the kind of structure that we have, there is indeed no opposition. For instance, Fred, you look at a mechanism where you run for an election and somebody beats you with a mere 200,000 votes. In Kenya, 200,000 is such a very small and slim margin. What do you do with the second runner? What do you do with the team that was really behind this person? So those are conversations that we must begin to think through, because not all governments will be run from a broad-based perspective. And you look at the degrees of disenfranchisement and discouragement. For example, the Gen Zs drove this agenda, and it was hijacked by certain individuals or by certain political parties or politicians. And you look at the government that has been put in place, there is no single Gen Z speaking, at the cabinet, speaking at very proper and appropriate levels of decision making. There is a gap that we need to begin to think through. How do we bring in inclusivity in government? 2/3 rule, for instance, has failed. Several attempts. I think there are over 8 or so attempts to be able to address that issue. So there are certain new frontiers of marginalization that if we thought through the Constitution, then we can begin to think about if we thought through a review of the Constitution, then we can think through how we cure some of those gaps. Lastly, we've just been talking about corruption, and you look at the Constitution that gives you a very strong architecture in terms of Article 10 and Chapter 6, leadership and integrity, and indeed national values and principles. And transparency and accountability is the bedrock of that particular chapter and article. But look at how we talk about corruption. So in my view, political goodwill is still lacking. Yes, of course, Mheshimiwa Sosion reiterates the president's narrative and voice, but it has to begin from His Excellency the President, that individuals who have been mentioned in any case should not even be nominated closer to centers of decision-making and centers where Kenyans expect a lot of engagement. And so if we can begin to think through how we seal and cure those kind of gaps that we already have tested the Constitution over and begin to see how we can be able to address them, I think we'll be moving very closer to giving Kenyans the dream that the Constitution actually anticipated. The head of public service, Mheshimiwa Felix Kosgei, has been talking largely about corruption. But if you listen to his narratives, they are more of what government wants to do. I think we've gotten to a level where Kenyans are saying, Please stop saying them, stop talking them. Can we do them, implement them, act them, and action them?
I hear you. Bonodede, when it comes to constitution amendments, there's a lot that needs to be fixed, including the fight against corruption and what can be done through the constitution to aid that fight. But it would appear that if at all we undertake that, any amendment, the political elite would probably hijack the process and try to fix political issues instead of substantive issues that ail the country. Do you think that that risk is real and that it may end up making such an attempt futile?
Thank you, Fred. I actually think we cannot fault the politicians because their business is politics and they have to do politics. That is who they are. That is what they are there to do. But as a country, we need to probably readjust and imagine and actually come to realization that every time we are not going to fix the nation with the laws. Laws are good, they guide, but they are not. It's like we want to legislate everything. We want to legislate love. We want to legislate. It's not possible. There are things that are morally wrong, but legally okay. There is no law against it, but still it is morally not okay. So we need to understand where the laws end and where we pick moral as a country and say there are things we will fix in this country on moral. I know this is not morally right. So whether the law allows me, like in the Bible, Nehemiah rebuilding the wall, he says, I know the law allows me to feed on your taxes and even do this. But because I see the burden of the people, I will not do it. If I have any other governor visiting or any other leaders from other nations, I will do everything from my own money because I realize the burden of the people. But there is no law stopping me from using your taxes on that. So sometimes a leader needs to go past what the law says, and that is what we lack. So I wonder why we are stuck in the old constitution where we simply see parliament and see opposition and government. The danger with this is one, anybody who was elected in the UDA ticket think they are an extension of executive in that house. That is the thinking we give them. And now if we see Right Honorable Raila Odinga and William Ruto, the president, trying to unite or work together on certain issues, it is largely perceived that ODM and UDA are now in the same space. So even the members of parliament from ODM will start imagining that they are in government and they forget that the role is clear. Whether you are elected independent, UDA, ODM, your work in this house was to put the executive to check accountability. But that is not what they will do when we keep talking about opposition versus government. So when are we going to forget about the old constitution and start making members of parliament realize that it is not about the party who brought you here. But you see, it is about being a parliamentarian to check the executive, irrespective.
But Meshach, that is really the structure in the constitution.
It is on possible constitution amendment.
And I pick it from where he's just left. The interpretation of the current constitution. Yeah. And that's where audit is required. Yeah. If we talk of opposition in parliament and opposition in the country, the current constitution does not create anything called opposition. It doesn't. In parliament, it makes parliament independent from the executive. Yeah. The whole parliament, all parliamentarians, from the speaker to the members of the assembly. It only creates a majority and a minority. It would even be possible that Wiper Democratic Party will be a majority in the current parliament, but it has not produced a president. Yes. UDA can be minority, but it has produced a president. That is the current architecture. That is the current architecture of this constitution. It doesn't create opposition or government in parliament. There is no government in parliament. There is minority and majority from the party. And all of them collectively do three things. They legislate, they represent the people, and they oversight collectively. That is how it is. But the thing is, have we practiced that for the last 24 years? Definitely no. So even some of the parliamentarians who are in parliament, rightly speaking, if that party has produced a president, they think they are government, which is not the case. It is only by coincidence that here, the majority party, in statistical patterns, has produced a president. But then that does not stop members of the majority from checking and oversighting government. So the issue is, for the last 24 years. 14 years, yes. Yeah, for the last 14 years. Yeah. Have we implemented the Constitution right? Have we interpreted and understood the letter and the spirit of the Constitution? Something has been talked about. You cannot over-legislate. From a Constitution, you can make laws to implement. Did we really make laws to implement? We don't have a law for referendum. Referendum is a provision so that when Kenyans want to decide something, allow them under the Article 10 to take those decisions. Public participation, that will even include referendum. And I'll question things like CBC, which I raised a lot of concerns and I was crucified by the Jubilee regime. A major undertaking of that nature, which is still a problem up to date. Did we allow effective and quality public participation? We are talking about the funding model for the universities. The new funding model is good per capita and it's student-based. But have we taken it through an effective public participation so that the vice-chancellors can give their view, the lecturers can give their views, the students can give their views, the public can give their views, and the tool that is agreed is domiciled in the career desk at the school level in our school system. Have we done that? Because it looks like we are continuing to defile this constitution and we think we can get another better constitution other than this one. Can we fully implement what we have first? Because I think all these calls for amendment are more for political selfish interest than the wider good of Kenyans. And I think we stop now clamoring on disturbing the Constitution. Let us leave the Constitution as it is. The problem of this country is not the Constitution. The problem of this country is our selfishness. Where you think the Constitution cannot allow you, you want to think it so that it can facilitate your selfish interest. We can still have the political architecture. And you see, the judges said what? Doctrine of basic structure. And you see, this matter was prosecuted in the courts, and the judges, the wise judges at all levels, returned the judgments which are here with us. Why are we wasting time dealing with the same? Can we deal with good governance in this country? Transparency, get rid of corruption with urgency today. Let's not talk of reducing.
Final
comments. Let's do it now.
We have about 2 minutes.
And in that way, we'll be able to make Kenya a better country. Let's have a robust economy. Can we create jobs for the youth? Let's not talk about creation, but let's engage in pragmatic steps to turn around the economy and create jobs for our youth. Let's have a country that gives promise to everyone. It is possible to do it without touching the Constitution.
Thank you so much, Bwana Sosion. Final words, just about 60 seconds.
You know, we agreed here that we'll allow him to speak like he is doing time-wise because of the teachers' strike. But we are all children of teachers as well. Are you a child of a teacher? No, of a bishop.
And very good teachers. You see, you speak very good English because you taught properly.
You're 60 seconds up, now it's 30
So
seconds.
2 things. One, I want to ask Kenyans to remain vigilant, particularly in this war on graft. Please hold your leaders accountable wherever you are. Form groups of citizens, agency structures like County Governance Watch. We have one called the Citizens Action Group that is really holding counties accountable. Number 2, Fred, for His Excellency the former Prime Minister, in his bid to be the AU chairman, a very difficult terrain, but we wish him all the best. Please be wary of the candidate from Djibouti and his strategies and his planning. Get very good French speakers and send them to African French-speaking countries if we are interested in getting those votes. Otherwise, all the best, Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga.
Thank you so much, Kevin Osedo, finally.
Thank you, Fred. I cannot finish without just going back to that structure because if it is working for us, well and good, but if it is not working, it needs fixing. As long as I know, you will take me to a magistrate court, and I will keep appealing all the way to the Supreme Court. In between, I have all the time and I have the resources to manipulate the judicial system. Allow me to say, if you ask me, I would propose some of this corruption, depending on how big it is, should not be beginning from the down, the courts at the lower level, because we are giving all these people all the time to have a way of manipulating the system in between before the final judgment is made.
Okay. Thank you so much, Meshach. Oh, you want to add something? I can give you 30 seconds.
I also want to do.
Oh, yes.
No. You've already made your final remarks.
So, number
But
one.
he did. He also did. Anyway.
No, you didn't allow me to make my final remarks. I thought it was part of the debate. Allow me. One, on teachers' issues. Government must now overhaul the TSC management without mercy so that we can restore the teachers and the motivation of teachers to be able to work. Short of which, we'll continue witnessing disaster after disaster in the education sector. And this, the president must be very keen about it, to overhaul TSC and ensure that there is industrial peace, respect, and teachers really can feel the respect from their employer. Number two, on graft, there must be urgency to eliminate graft out of this country, not tomorrow, but today. And lastly, we should be very cautious about clamoring for the change of the Constitution. Let us fully implement the Constitution and turn around the economy and turn around and ensure that Kenyans enjoy the aspirations that are provided for.
Thank you so much, Bwana Wilson Sosion, former member of the National Assembly and also one-time Secretary General of the Kenya National Union of Teachers. Kevin Osido, Executive Director, County Governance Watch, and Meshach Odede, political commentator. Thank you for your time at TV47 and for your very well-considered opinions on the issues we've discussed, ranging from graft, the teachers' strike, as well as constitutional amendments. You're still watching Morning Cafe. After the break, we go legal. We'll be discussing